you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Oh, you bet. I'm good. So, why don't you tell the audience who you are and really what you're passionate about?
I'm Dean James. I work with Luma with Gina. I am an instructional designer. Just became an instructional designer about a full time about a month ago. Started with the company about 16 months ago or so as
Yeah.
a instructional support specialist and working in support with dealing with drivers and clients. But I've transitioned over to instructional design in the last month or two, and there I've been doing that full time now, which is really awesome. And have a lot of passion for that with creativity, which has always kind of built on my just enjoyment of being creative, thinking outside the box with things from big passion for gaming over the years and writing and just different things that all just kind of parlay together to work really well in this
Yeah.
environment.
That's awesome. Dean, tell everyone about your background. I think Dean has the best office on the planet. So, Dean, tell
I
us,
have
tell us, look at that. You got all sorts of fun things.
I have so many different things. I have Pokemon behind me, Kermit the Frog behind me, our mascot Nugget and Brush you see kind of right over my head
Yeah.
there. Different gaming books, different lots of little characters for things. Appa from Avatar: The Last Airbender, if anyone's ever seen that.
Yeah.
Just
That's
lots
cool.
of Shiba Inu little mini knockoff Lego thing above me too. That's
Yeah.
cool. Just lots of little things. I just try and like to have an interesting background.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's great. So Dean, you did really well in school. So I'm really excited to talk to you about specifically my podcast. I love learning. So you did really well in school, and you're very creative. And I just wanted to like learn a little bit more about what inspires you to want to learn.
What inspires me to want to learn is just to always better myself. If I'm just stationary and not doing something to better myself, I'm just gonna
Hmm.
feel stagnant, feel like I'm not moving forward. Everyone has those days where they just want to sit back and do nothing. That's fine. But for the
Sure.
most part, in general, you want to always be bettering yourself, whether that's learning something new, whether that's just building a something you already know partially, but to better yourself at, just whether it's learning a new language, whether it's bettering yourself in the English language if you've been that your whole life, like I have. I've known English. That's what I learned first, but
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
can always learn more, whether it's
Uh-huh.
grammar or anything like that. You can always better yourself. For me, like playing a game, playing it over and over, learning, I'll still pull out Tetris from back in the day. Just
Oh,
see if I
wow.
can
I
do
love
better than
Tetris.
that
Yeah, that's a
or
good
something
one.
new. It's just always interesting to try and find new things, but just like the key to it to me for learning is what I
Uh-huh.
love is just to better myself and to I think that's the key for everyone. It's just kind of to better
Oh,
myself and also to better things for everyone else. If I can learn things that can help someone else, that's also going to be
uh-huh.
better as well.
That's great. Do you think you've always had that desire to learn, or where do you think that came from? Do you think you were born with that, or did that come as an adult for you?
I feel like I've had it most of my life. It's kind of
Mhm.
that's something that goes back to like my parents were always very big. They weren't ones that were like crazy push you like you have to do this, but they were ones that they expect. They wanted me to do well in school. They did gave me
Mhm.
everything possible they could to help me get there. They would help me
Mhm.
if I needed help with something. They would obviously try, even if they didn't know the class I was in, that kind of thing. They would try and help me, but they were the ones that would want me to push and learn it myself. Not gonna I know there's some people that'll have like you always hear that, oh, your parents did your work for you. No,
Yeah.
mine definitely
Yeah.
weren't. They were always striving for me to
Mhm.
learn more. I remember even when I was really young, like most people,
Mhm.
get the summer and want to just do nothing. And I'm from this,
Uh-huh.
I enjoyed my summers. I enjoyed
Yeah,
not having
sure.
school. But I also remember, like when I was young, my aunt had a friend that I grew up with, a family friend that she was a teacher and she would like
Uh-huh.
supplement learning. She had these things that I would go out of my way. I don't. When I was a kid, I'm surprised now looking back. I would want to supplement my learning. So like during the summer, I would go and when I was in
Mhm.
elementary school and learned extra things. And even I think even before I was in kindergarten, I was learning things from her too, just learning little things that just kind of has just been ingrained in my head, I guess,
Got
since I was
it.
little from just as a family or just maybe it was there, maybe I was born with it too, and they just
Yeah, maybe a
helping
little bit
kept
both.
push that forward, a little bit of
Yeah,
both.
that makes sense. Like it sounds like they really like valued education as well. So that kind of instilled that in you, but you probably have that drive within you to do it too, because you continue to do it as an adult.
Right, definitely. I could definitely
Yeah.
agree with that.
Do you think, is there anything that you can think of that really, when you think of learning, that really engages you? Like the most exciting learning experience, like what does that look like to you? What really engages you in learning?
The most exciting learning experience for me is something that I can tell is authentic.
Mhm.
If I'm just getting constant, if it's okay, read this section and here's a question, then it's the same thing every time. Like there's nothing you like variance in what you're learning. If I'm reading the same thing again, like if a textbooks are
Mhm.
can be, that's why usually like if you're going to learn something, you don't just buy a textbook and read it front to back. You
Mhm.
go to a class, they supplement, they take the information from the textbook, but then they'll do a lesson about it. They'll teach you that way and do that because there's more to it. And that's kind of like what I've learned here at Luma. It's big on
Mhm.
that we don't have that core, we don't have like the actual classroom experience. So I know some
Mhm.
carriers that we have here do that, like supplement it, use
Mhm.
it in person, but we
Mhm.
try and make it where it feels more like a in-class learning experience versus a just textbook front to back, because no one wants to open a textbook and read it front to back
Right. You used
because
to
you're
work at
gonna
a
bore yourself.
library, right?
I
You
did,
worked in a
I did.
library. There were a lot of books there, and
There
I know
were,
you.
and people for
Yeah.
the most part, we had a library full of, when I started, I think
Huh.
130,000 books, and
Wow, that's a
people
lot of
did,
books.
and very rarely did
Mhm.
people check out books because
Yeah.
they cared about their classes, they had their they would get some books to supplement their classes, but other than
Yeah.
that, they wanted to find digital things online that were very different ways of learning that felt like authentic that they could learn from. They did online stuff, like especially during the pandemic. Working
Yeah.
at the
It was
university,
really
that was a
different.
very interesting
Yeah.
experience. Working in a library that had used to have a lot of people there, that really changed a lot of things. Seeing
I
people
bet.
transition to learning
Yeah.
online and then going back to the classroom and still learning
Uh-huh.
people, like a lot of things have changed. And I think the workplaces have changed a lot too
Yeah.
because now people realize, hey, we could do an orientation virtually. We can do things like that
Yeah.
instead of having to bring everyone in the same location, just because not just a safety because of the pandemic. It's like it's more convenient and you can
Right.
still teach people as long as your focus is, the key to me is going back.
Mhm.
So as long as your focus is being authentic and offering learning that's not just boring and monotonous, then that's really going to
Yeah.
help keep
Gene,
me
it's
going.
interesting you say that about doing this online. One of the things that people often say to me is like, how do you really then build that human connection? If we're all virtual, like if we never see each other in person, how do we build those human connections so that that element of learning isn't lost? Have you experienced anything like that?
I definitely think at times it takes some getting used to, especially for people that have never dealt with technology. Like for one,
Mhm.
me coming on board here at Luma, I worked, like I said, for the first year or so or more with customer support and helping people. Seeing there's a lot of drivers, especially in this industry, that didn't even grow up with computers like me. That
Mhm.
since I grew up in the 90s, that's when computers were first coming around. That's when they were a really big deal, even in like elementary school for me. So like I've been ingrained with that, but anyone older than that, it's not always the case, and you have to
Yeah.
kind
It's
of
difficult.
learn. So it takes that, you
Mhm.
have to get over some initial hurdles on that. But
Yeah.
I think once you get past that, even if it's not direct training, like I took when I was in college, I was kind of that level. I know there were full online classes and places, but like at
Mhm.
my university, if you were going to school there were very few online classes that you would take,
Mhm.
like just as a thing instead of like one of your classes like you were doing the online college. And I
Got it.
remember I had one of them and it was fine. It was one where it
Mhm.
was, they gave you a weekly, they would upload a PowerPoint presentation with them
Oh.
voicing audio over it, and that was
Mhm.
pretty much it. And that was fine, but it fell into that thing like I said before, that you got to avoid that monotony of it. It felt
Yes,
the same way, that even
exactly.
though there was the
Mhm.
interaction with them, you
Mhm.
still didn't have that. There was still no variance. There was nothing. It just felt like there wasn't. It just felt like they were trying to do the bare minimum for that online class. When I think when you're
Got it.
doing it
Mhm.
online, even online without a person, you just want to make sure that it's built to cater to learners that either are used to this kind of technology or ones that aren't. You have to
Mhm.
try and build it for each way, and you obviously can cater more towards the technologically savvy and try and build the ones that aren't towards that learning. But
Mhm.
you can't outright go all in on one, because the learners that don't
Yeah,
know that or aren't used to it are just gonna completely push away and not want to do it. And we see that because we've
exactly.
had some. I know personally, I've dealt with some drivers in the past that it took a lot that of learning. And as you taught me, you have to kill them with kindness. They are
Mhm.
completely lost on this, and you have to just help them out. And eventually, they get there. There's just some people that are, unfortunately, I don't think are ever going to get there with the technology, that are just they are just stubborn and not going to try. But if you at least give it a
Mhm.
try, and that's what we try and do here. I know at Luma, and just in general, try and that
Mhm.
I know the just learning in general, people are trying to build that as you try and make it where they can at least
Yeah. I
give them a
think
chance at it.
right. And I think, Dean, it really, like we've talked a lot about, is everyone needs different elements to learn, and not everyone is going to be able to engage in the same way at the same time. So, giving a variety is really important. Why don't you tell the audience about a time where you maybe learned something that you can think back to that you left a huge impression? Maybe there was some time in your education career, either as a young adult or as a child or as an adult, that really left an impact on how you think about things.
One thing that goes back, and I guess this kind of builds into a previous question when we were talking about like what kind of imprinted learning on and stuff, other than like my parents.
Mhm.
I had the fortune of having a fantastic teacher when I was in first
Oh,
grade.
I
I
love
moved I had
that.
one in first and second grade. His name was Mr.
Yeah.
Elliott. He was
Oh,
I had
Mr.
moved
Elliott.
when I
Shout out to
uh,
Mr. Elliott.
when I
Oh,
lived in had moved to Michigan when I was younger. I'm from South
uh-huh.
Carolina and have lived here most of my life. We lived there for
Mhm.
3 years, so it was kind of out of my element going up there. And
Mhm.
had my first grade was my first year I was up there. He was a
Mhm.
great teacher, and he just was one that there was something about it. He you could tell that he loved the idea of learning, loved the idea of teaching to
Uh-huh.
us, and he found a way to do that. He just would imprint it on us, and just that
Yeah,
on
he
top of
really
learning
cared.
before.
He
He
really
did.
cared, didn't he? He cared
He
and
did.
wanted you all to do well. And you remember that as such a
I
young
do.
child. Yeah.
And one of
Teachers
the
have
things
such a great impression.
one of the really cool things that was awesome too
Mhm.
is like I did that. We had him at first and second, then obviously we moved and everything. And back when I started at the library I started working at a university library down this area in 2016. Started
Mhm.
working there, and like within like I want to say it was a few months of me working there, I all of a sudden got an email to my work email, and they're like, by chance, hey, are you the Dean James at so and so and so and so? And it was from him. He had looked up my name because
Wow.
they had talked about moving down to the South Carolina area at some
Yeah.
point, and he looked up my name and he said, "Oh yeah, well we did move
Oh,
down here, and I was looking your name online to see if I could find it, and it came up, and we ended up
yeah.
like going and having lunch together one day, so it was kind of cool to reconnect because he
That's
was such an
really neat,
important
Dean.
part of my life like that. He was just
Yeah.
that like
Teachers,
I hadn't
shout
seen him in
out.
year, and then now with a
Yeah.
thing for like technology like that, since then,
Uh-huh.
like we're friends on social media, we keep up with one another on that. That just shows that it's important to build new things with technology. If you can integrate it into your life, whether it's for learning or just personal use, you can keep up with things like that.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, I would have never probably taught him ever again, and
Yeah.
that would have been unfortunate because he
Exactly.
was a big part of my life. That just
What's the main takeaway that you remember that he taught you?
main takeaway taught me. Have to think, so it's just not something off the cuff with it.
Oh, teachers are awesome.
He
Elementary
really was
teachers.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Really, the thing I think with him was to just find what you really love about it, like, it just
Yeah.
in key if you really enjoy it, really put your passion into that, and that's just kind of
Mhm.
the I don't know if that's specifically something that he said,
Oh,
but, like, that's what I felt from him, like,
yes.
at the least, that whenever he was talking, just love like because that's what he did. He loved learning, he loved teaching
Love
us, he
learning. I
loved
love learning. That's my
yeah,
podcast, Dean. I
exactly.
love learning. It's my
So
passion. Yes.
that was his big thing was just,
Oh, I want
he
to
just
meet him.
imprinted on
Maybe,
that.
hey, if he's listening, he can come on our
Yeah.
podcast. So you can invite
I'm
him.
sure
You
he would
invite him
love
on
it.
my podcast. Oh, that'd be amazing. All right. So I think that really goes into the next thing I'm really interested in is really thinking about there's two ways you can answer this. So maybe there was a time, Dean, that you helped someone overcome a learning hurdle, or maybe in your own life there was something that you overcame that was the impossible. So you have a choice in thinking about that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to either help people overcome learning hurdles, or maybe there's something that you overcame. It was the impossible and you overcame.
I think I kind of spoke about it a little bit earlier. There was a few mine for the year and a little over a year I was working in customer support here at Luma. I've
Mhm.
dealt with a number of drivers, and most of them were you could at least it was not that long of a call. You'd be on there maybe 10, 15 minutes. You could help them, and they may have to call back with help. But
Mhm.
I remember there's one or two specific ones that ended up being on there probably over an hour of helping just because you could tell that
Aw,
they were having trouble
patience.
with something. They just
Yeah.
had they grew up without the
Mhm.
computers. They really don't have computers. They just because some people don't
Mhm.
adopt that. Some people are just more old school and haven't felt the need. And unfortunately for them, it's really just because things transition. Unfortunately, industries change. Things have to get better just because it's for orientation
Yeah.
purposes, for documentation purposes, learning. It's just
Mhm.
to get the best level of learning for them out there that we have to use new technologies because if you
Right.
stick with the old ones, things are never going to get better, and that's what you would do is you always want to better yourself,
Moving
better your company.
forward, Dean.
And
Moving
so I remember
forward.
there was one I spoke with, and they had I believe at the time, I'm trying to remember if they even had a smartphone. I think they had a flip phone, so they were having
Oh,
trouble with that, with
wow.
getting numbers,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
they were having to try and get logged into our system, so it was hard to get
Mhm.
them in there to where they had to get codes like a 2FA code. I believe they're one of our carriers that required
Mhm.
that. They had to get logged in just for security purposes, and I spoke with them and got them through. And basically, they were just for the first little bit, they were a little rude on things. They were like,
Mhm.
just getting frustrated, which is understandable. Like you have to
Mhm.
understand that, take that at face value. Just can't because you don't know how their day's going. You don't know. And so I know. So
Right.
you always just try. You don't fight back with them. You just can't do that in customer service. From all the years I worked in it, you learn
Yeah.
you have nothing to gain doing that. You just have to
Mhm.
do it. So
Mhm.
I just kind of helped them through it, got them through
That's
step by step.
awesome.
And like you have
Yeah.
those girls, like you get there, and like I remember spending 30 minutes, and
Mhm.
then we were basically back to square one because like you got there and it wasn't working. It's like, oh, well, it's like, okay, well, let's try this. And we tried different solutions. And after
Mhm.
it's probably about an hour, we finally, like, I got them through the steps again of how to
Mhm.
get to here and how to get to here. And like finally we got him logged in. And by the end of it, he was so thankful. Like he was, like some people just, I knew that or something, or just you
Mhm.
could sometimes you get ones like that. He was so thankful, and he's like, "Thank you for not just like
Aw,
forgetting about me and leaving me, brushing me
that's the
off." Like,
best.
and that's where you get the enjoyment out of it. Is like just really helping people that need the help, and he obviously did, and
Exactly.
got him logged in. And I remember I went back and checked to make sure he did his training, and like afterwards I saw he
Mhm.
went in and actually went through the training. He didn't have to call back in, which made me happy. Cause I kind of expected he would start training, get logged out, and then have to call
Mhm.
again. And I never saw another ticket from him, so that just made me happy to get him through and help him out.
That's awesome, Dean. All right, final thoughts, Dean. If somebody today is feeling unmotivated to learn and they don't love learning, what would you say to them as a final thought for this I Love Learning podcast?
I would say that probably the reason why you're unmotivated in that is because you're trying to learn the wrong things. Try and find something
Oh,
else that makes you passionate about it. If what you think you want to learn or do is just not sparking that creativity, find something else. That whether it's in the same field or something completely different. Like if you're trying to write something, like let's say you're writing, you're trying to write a book, or you just have a writer's block, do something else. Go and download a language app and start learning a new language. Just something if you're having trouble with like that, just do that. Or maybe go and start doing some research for something else. Like look at like I'm one that I enjoy doing a lot of those like daily games like Wordle, and there's ones that have to do like
oh,
with baseball.
yeah.
There's one called
Mhm.
Immaculate Grid where it has like sports stats. Like go and start looking at something like that to get your brain going, and maybe that'll say, "Oh, my brain now it's going," and then that may get you to get motivated to go back to something else that you were having trouble with. Just like that's what I always do. If I'm not getting motivated on something, I kind of switch gears to something else, and then hopefully that gets the train going, and then I can move back and get motivated on what I was originally doing.
Awesome, Dean. I love that. Well, thank you for being part of my podcast this morning and being the first person to jump on the opportunity. I appreciate you so much. Dean James, he's here today, our awesome instructional designer at Luma and also did customer service. So thank you, Dean, for being on today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's pretty special being the first person, so